Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another episode of Rethink Culture, the podcast that shines a spotlight on leaders of businesses people love to work for. My name is Andreas Constantino, and I'm your host. I'm a micromanager turned servant leader who developed a passion for workplace culture. At Rethink Culture, we're on a mission to help 1 million companies create a healthier, more fulfilling culture at work. And our latest project is a Culture Health Score, an online service that lets you measure your culture so you can manage it. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ulla Sommerfelt from Denmark to the podcast. Ulla is a serial entrepreneur. She's an experienced CEO, a founder with an exit, an investor, and a mentor. She's passionate about leadership and culture design and recently published her book, which is called Firesoul Leadership and has a nice bright red cover. And she's built culture from scratch there you go. Yeah, if you're watching the video, just got to see the book. And she's built a culture from scratch at Eggs Design. That's capital Eggs, EGGS. And that's a design and innovation consultancy. Over 10 years, she grew it to 130 people from 27 countries, has 3 grown-up children in 3 countries, loves to hang out on her vacation home in a Danish island. In her spare time, she fixes up her old house, picking up apples, walking with her daughter's dog. And professionally, she's also passionate in building up her new venture, which is Femtech Studios, which is about female wellness. And her motto is never stagnate. So with all of that, very welcome to the Rethink Culture podcast, Ulla.
Thank you so much for having me.
So one of the things that stood out in going through your book is this. One day that you woke up with a clear vision, which is wanting to build the world's best workplace for people, which is hugely inspiring. How did you get there? So what was your journey to that epiphany?
Well, I had been a leader already and entrepreneur before, so I had learned how to lead people over time. But what really drove me to get to that vision was that I had also felt how terrible fear can be in many workplaces. Toxic work cultures that just shut people down and don't get the best out of people, even make them sick very often. And so that was really that pain, I would say, was what led to the vision, because I just knew I could do better as a leader and a company builder.
How did you end up there? Where did you grow up, if we start from the early years of Ulla as a child, and who was a big influence that inspired your thinking?
I grew up on the west coast of Denmark, in a mid-sized city for Danish standards. And I just had a safe childhood, I must say. And when I was 10, my dad started a new company. So I basically grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My mom also joined the business, and so did I when I was 10. So I was learning to archive documents. I also learned to type at school, actually, when I was 11. So when I turned 12, I was allowed to write invoices on the typewriter, which was a huge honor, because that was really the gold and the money of the business. Learning to do that and understand that this is where, how we make money. We have to get those invoices out. I also learned to do accounting. So I learned a lot from my mom on the office side, and of course from my dad when it comes to just running a business. So that is something that I never really actually appreciated at the time, but something that I got to appreciate when I grew older, and look back at just learning that by being part of a business is really valuable. My mom, I would say, you asked about inspiration. I think she was a huge inspiration for me. Fortunately, she passed away, but she was a very, very kind person. There was so much love. And I think that has also inspired me to appreciate people and to just learn that you can lead with love.
And I think you use the expression not give and take, but give and give.
That's right.
Right?
I learned that from her too.
What does it mean for you?
For me, it means that life is not about give and take. It means, to me, it's about give and give. Sometimes you get disappointed, of course, if you only give and give. And I think in the long run, whatever you send out in the world, you get back at some point. So I learned that from her, using that awareness of the energy that you send out and the love that you give, and not necessarily expecting anything back, at least not in short term. Of course, you also have to take care of yourself and not be naive. But I think, to me, it's been a life kind of philosophy. It's become that. It wasn't when I was 17 or 27, but I just became more aware of that as I grew older. That how important that is for me, anyway.
And so you built eggs, which you'll tell us more about. And you decided to write a book about the culture, which is Firesoul leadership. So, firstly, what is Firesoul?
Firesoul is not really a word. It should be. It's a direct translation from a word we use in Scandinavia, which is ildsjäl. It's just directly translated into Firesoul. And a Firesoul is a person who is really passionate about something. You will find Firesouls in many businesses, but you will also find typically Firesouls in volunteering, in community building, in religion, different areas where people are just really passionate about something, and they spend time and energy on that topic because they love to do it and don't really burn out. So we wanted to tap into that energy in eggs, in our culture, and try to allocate projects based on what people were Firesoul for as well, because we were a consultancy with projects in many types of businesses, and we were able to also leverage people's passion into the projects that were given. So, but first of all, we had to become aware of what people were Firesoul for. So we just coined that term because our working language is English. And so we had to speak English, and we couldn't use the Scandinavian term. So we had to translate it into Firesoul, and it just became a part of our vocabulary. And people were very much aware of what they were Firesoul for, but also what their colleagues were Firesoul for. So we could play on each other's energy in this sense. So helping people to become aware of what gives them energy and what drains them, and the other side of the medal, was something we started out with from the get-go, and then try to really develop the skills within these areas as well.
And you have a big passion for culture, but also in your book, I see you're equally analytical and structured, but also equally using examples and experiential learning, like case studies. And you talk about net positive culture as a term. What is it, and what does it mean?
Net positive means more than zero. We know that our P&Ls have to yield a net positive financial result, but I think also businesses need to yield a net positive people result. And net positive just means giving more than you take. And I believe that businesses have the potential to be places where people can grow and become better versions of themselves by not only becoming better professionals, but also developing themselves personal as well. So personal development, which is one way of thinking about net positive culture. But also, how we deal with conflict and how we deal with fear, because we can't avoid fear. It's kind of something that is inside us, no matter whether we like it or not. We will have our luggage that can lead to fear. And just opening up that conversation and having good ways of dealing with friction, fear, because we can't go around and just be happy all the time. That's really not the point. We have ups and downs, and we have challenges, and that's also what makes us grow.
And also makes us human, right? And
makes us human.
We talked earlier about fearless organizations, and I think we both agreed that the problem with the term fearless is that it implies you cannot talk about fear. And it's, in a sense, it's toxic positivity, which you also talk about in your book. Tell us a little more on toxic positivity.
Yeah, toxic positivity, actually, I learned about that the hard way, because I am, a very positive person. I will also give that credit to my mom for thinking positively at all times. And because when I was a kid, she would always turn things around, saying if something bad happened, saying, my dog died, or something really bad that made me sad or upset. She would always turn it around and say, okay, what good can come out of this situation? So she kind of trained my brain that way. So my brain works that way. It's been, it's been trained to think, how can we turn things around, to think positively about the situation. And I was really annoyed with her, I remember, at the time, because of course I was upset and I didn't want to think positively, but just having a short kind of recess there, and not be depressed over many days. So I am a positive person, and at the point in our on our journey in eggs, we were really having a very positive culture as well, with lots of high fives and cheering for each other and celebrating every win, right, together. And at some point, one of our offices were not doing that well. So I think we had three or four offices at the time, and one of the offices were struggling a lot with their business and with many things, and they just felt left out of all the positive excitement that was going around in all the other offices. And they brought it up to me. They said, okay, look, it's really hurting us when everybody's cheering and we're sitting over here not feeling it. We're not feeling that great about things. So we also need to be able to talk about that. And because we had the openness and the trust in the organization, people also dared to bring that up instead of just leaving or doing other things that would be worse. So I was really grateful. It's super painful to get your blind spots uncovered like that. But for me, it was a blind spot. And then I learned that it's important to also be aware of when people are not feeling the positivity at all times. And that's when positivity can become toxic, I think, if we don't talk about the fear or the adversary or whatever that we can feel at any given time in our lives and or our business.
Yeah, I think toxic positivity can trigger another word which is featured in your book, which is psychological safety or lack of psychological safety. So if we don't talk about what concerns us, we are not able to bring our full selves to work. We're not able to work in our best capacity.
Absolutely.
What were some of the cultural underpinnings of eggs? So what makes the eggs culture special?
It's a lot of things, of course. It's just not one thing. But the fact that we created the culture as a system, and I'll give all the credit to my co-workers, designers, because it was a design and it is still a design and innovation consultancy. And just like we designed products and services and business models for our clients, we use the same methodology, approach to design the culture. And designing really is creating something out of nothing. So when we started from scratch, we just went ahead and started exploring. There weren't really any books or anything we could start learning from. So we just did it by using the design methodology, but with people first, of course. Thinking about what do people actually need? What do we need as founders, and what do we want to create that people want to become a part of? So the first things that we did were, in addition to, in parallel with building our strategy, was also to work on our values. That was the first, I think, real culture step to the culture, was to co-create our values, I would say. So everybody was involved. We were growing super fast from the beginning. So we were 20 people the first year, and we had our first gathering with all 20 people present, and everybody was involved in designing and defining our values, which means that when you use co-creation, which is one thing that is a really important part of building culture, is that people feel ownership, and you don't have to explain or implement it afterwards, because when you've co-created, everybody's involved and everybody knows what we're talking about and why we have those values. And we use co-creation as a methodology for everything we did, even when we were 130 people.
What's an example of co-creation?
An example of co-creation is using methodologies from the design toolbox, like workshops, giving a short brief to different groups in the company, saying, okay, well, let me use the values workshop as an example. We had 4 values, and we wanted the 4 values to represent different parts of the business. So the very short brief saying, okay, we need a value that's related to how we treat people. Or we need a value that's related to how we run our business, and what kind of driver this value should represent for how we worked as a consultant, right? Consultancy. And then they used brainstorming in those groups, and just combination of reflection, self-reflection, and also sharing with the thoughts with each other, and then deriving the words from that. And also a powerful tool that designers have is visualization. So drawing things, illustrating, drawing, because once you have a drawing or some kind of visual representation of anything, it becomes a lot easier to understand what it actually means. If you don't have your own facilitators, having an external facilitator can also be really useful to co-create. But really doing it is a bottom-up thing,
And in your book, you have very beautiful but also appropriate illustrations to illustrate the topics you talk about. And very similar actually to the Reinventing Organizations book, which I'm sure you're aware. But Reinventing Organizations is a book about self-management that basically started the self-management revolution, and also very thoughtful in using illustrations to explain the topics. That aside, something else I took from your book is mistakes, feedback, and communication are all part of a net positive culture. So help us understand how.
So to us, it was really important to have an innovative culture, because we were an innovation consultancy. And mistakes and failing is a very important part of innovation. So when we were working with clients on projects, just generating lots and lots of ideas and then daring to kill your darlings, as it's called in the design language, is also important when you do innovation, because you tend to fall in love with your own ideas. You tend to fall in love with your first idea, but spending enough time to also criticize every idea that comes on the table, and daring to be not to be right, is something that also has to it can be hard, when somebody proves you wrong, but having a culture where that's allowed, and people can also listen more than just talk all the time, is very important for innovation, and getting different perspectives, definitely. And I'd go back to values again, because one of the values that probably meant the most to our people was the value dare to share. Dare to share your work early and get criticized to improve. Dare to share your worries, your fear, and even personal stories. Also, became the result of this value that drove behavior so strongly. And when you have, you hire like super ambitious, the best people, insecure overachiever, dare to share can be hard. But with the culture that's safe, then people would actually open up a lot more, and that would help them improve in so many ways. Did that answer your question?
It did, and it spawned even more questions. So, how did you deal with, for example, mistakes that the client would notice? Or how did you create a culture where people didn't feel rejected when they heard the negative feedback?
Yeah. So how we dealt with mistakes that the client would notice? Well, first of all, the person who made the mistake would be aware of it herself or himself. So very often that person would go to the leader or a colleague for help to figure out how do we deal with this. Very often we would just back people up, and sometimes it would be necessary to also bring a senior person into the conversation with the client. And I've done that a few times, and then I kind of stopped doing that because I said, look, I can go in and fix this, no problem. I can do that, but you won't learn anything if I do it. So why don't I coach you instead? And then if you screw up, know that I will have your back. And when people knew that they were allowed to take those steps themselves, and then if they failed, I would pick them up and help them and have their back. So that was my approach as a leader. And of course, we had many leaders in eggs, and that was kind of the leadership style. We weren't micromanagers. We really focused a lot on autonomy and self-leadership, training people in self-leadership to also deal with the difficult situations was part of the training that they would get. And I did give courses in self-leadership internally as part of the onboarding program. And every time I had ended a course, it was more like a workshop type of course, half a day. And every time I would ask people in the end saying, okay, so in a company where people lead themselves, what do we need leaders for? And every time the answer was, we need leaders to give us direction and to inspire us. And we need leaders to push us out of our comfort zones and then have our backs when we fail. This was a repetitive kind of feedback for what people needed leaders for.
This is golden. This is
And that
so
became
meaningful.
very, very important for our leadership development programs as well.
In your book, you talk a lot about rituals, and rituals for me are so much undervalued because even in mature businesses, we focus so much on processes and improving processes, which is how, 3 or 5 or 20 people work together and what is the sequence of steps. But we often forget to embed and manifest our values through culture rituals, so culture processes. And you mentioned quite a few in your book. But I actually I'll pass the microphone to you and ask you why are rituals important, and what are some examples of rituals you practice at Eggs?
Yeah, really, I totally agree with you about rituals being a super important part of the culture. It's really the glue that binds us together, and it's where the culture is lived every day and on a continuous basis. And rituals can be small, they can be medium sized, and then they can be large. But they're all important. I think all companies have rituals. They might not think so much about them, and they might not have designed them with a clear purpose or intention, which is a potential that every business has to do. I mean, a lot of people have rituals or a lot of companies have rituals like town hall meetings or some annual event, or they go out for a beverage, or many companies have rituals at more or less any level. But rituals with intention should be scalable and inclusive in order to do the job, I think. So at Eggs, we started out with rituals that were both big and small. Actually, we had rituals like, for example, when there was something that was a difficult matter, we would do a fish on the table exercise. It goes like this. A fish is like a problem that you keep in your pocket. If you keep it there for too long, it starts stinking. So it's just like a problem. If you don't talk about it, it just becomes worse. So that's why we call it a fish on the table. And the ritual is about talking about the positive sides of this, whatever situation it is, the issue, the negative side of the issue, but also to talk about what are the inspirations and hope for the future. So we did it a lot of times. We also did it in workshops with clients about redesigning a system or redesigning some process for our clients or with our clients. So it's a good way of bringing everybody on board and see the different perspectives that a group of people will have at any time. We never see the world alike. So the fish on the table exercise was something that we started out with really early. We also had rituals that were monthly meetings where we would meet one afternoon and share how the business was going. So everybody would be aware of how the numbers were looking and what the clients we were working with. So just bring everybody on board and understand really the whole side of the business. Also gives people the opportunity to pitch in and to make sure that things were going in the right direction. Just being really transparent about everything. And we did that in monthly meetings. And we had an annual getaway that we called Expedition. Eggs is a funny name because we can play around with it a lot. And we did. It never got old. All kinds of eggs metaphors. So the annual expedition was not just like a vacation. It was also a place where we would spend time together and work together and create something together. This is where our values were created and recreated. This is where our purpose was manifested. And we did a lot of work in those getaways that were, first of all, cultural work, basically. And also in meeting, because we were sitting in different parts of the world and meeting physically and getting to know colleagues was really good. So everybody knew each other in Eggs, even when we were 130.
One ritual which I enjoy that we have in my other company /data is we celebrate birthdays. So as an employee, you take a paid day off when it's your birthday. So people wish you happy birthday on that day. You're not working, but when you come back, you return, the favor, and you tell people what you've been doing. You post pictures, and everybody really enjoys. And we often get on Zoom to wish someone happy birthday. And as you'd guess, if everyone sings from 20 different locations, 30 different locations at the same time, and it ends up in a cacophony, in a funny, happy birthday song.
Amazing.
But that's actually what makes it, fun and playful.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I think the more intentional we are about those rituals, the more fun we can systematically inject in our cultures. One of my favorite examples I get back to often is an example from a company called Jam. He has a ritual where when someone joins the organization, they ask them, what's your favorite walking song? So if you would walk in to a sports match, and as you walked in the stadium, they would play this music for you, what would be that music? So when that person joins the office and it's the first day in the office, they play that song and everybody gets up and they form a human bridge where the new starter passes under, and it's so much fun. Even the people who are working remotely, they're on the TV screen and they're cheering.
Amazing.
So it just makes you so much welcome in the organization.
It really sounds amazing.
It also reminds me how important the first few days of a new person in the organization is. So I forget his surname, Joel, who's the author of the never lose an employee again. He talks about how the first time, or just when you receive an invitation to work for a company, and the next few days or months until you start are some of the best moments in your life, because you're so eager to join that company and you dream about all of the things you could do there and all the potential for growth and all the people you'll meet and conversation you have and so on. And most companies are just don't put any thought into that. So you get your desk, you get your laptop, and here is what you need to do for the first day or first week. But if we think more about how we can celebrate those first few days or first few weeks in the job, it's just so much more human and helps people feel welcome and seen and recognized and understood and celebrated. It makes all the difference in creating a better culture.
Well, I agree, and I think that is such a lost opportunity if you don't do anything out of that. We did a lot of that. We also designed our, of course, onboarding and our employee journey, starting with pre-boarding and all that with intention, and even offboarding. So in Eggs, we did several things as well, connection with that. For example, when you sign the contract with it for the new company, very often, at least in Norway, it takes 3 months usually until you can start the job, because you have 3 months of notice. Very many people have 3 months of notice for the old job. Absolutely. It takes a long time, right? And once you sign the contract, after negotiations and all kinds of considerations, and people get super excited, right? But it takes 3 months until they can actually join. I mean, and you sit there with all this energy and really look forward, as you say, and you have nobody to celebrate with because it takes a long time before you start. And so what we did was we actually gave people a gift card for a dinner for two, so they could go out and celebrate with a loved one.
Oh, wonderful!
And to kind of appreciate the fact that they were happy there by themselves, and we weren't part of it. Well, they weren't still part of our company, right? Another thing we did was, and that's both to make people feel welcome, but also to take away the fear of authority that a lot of people can have. Every time we signed a new employee, I would get an email from the HR person saying that, okay, now we've signed this one, and here's the LinkedIn profile. So I would go and connect with the person on LinkedIn and write a small message saying that I hear that we'll be colleagues really soon, and I look forward to something like that. Just to make people feel welcome, but also to take away the fear of the CEO, because a lot of people have this fear of authority. Absolutely. And I didn't want to be that type of leader that people should fear. So we did that, and we also did, I also had coffee talks with everybody who start. That became harder and harder with distance and especially COVID, but I would do half an hour, coffee talk online as well if it wasn't possible to meet physically. Just because I was also curious about people who joined us, who are they, what are they Firesoul for, and just give them an opportunity to ask me any questions that they might have about the company and about me, and have a very, very informal chat. That would take down a lot of the tension, related to, new people and the fear of not being good enough or whatever people could feel.
And it also helps the leader, because as leaders, especially the larger the business, the more pressure there is on the leader to perform and show they're this icon of what people expect of them to be. And once we start accepting our humanity as leaders and becoming vulnerable and saying, I'm not in my best shape today because I didn't sleep enough. Or I have an issue I'm dealing with at home, a health issue of a loved one, and excuse me for not being able to be or to live up to your expectations. But once we're vulnerable and connect with people, this also puts the pressure off of us as leaders. So I think it benefits both sides.
100%.
Another favorite question of mine, Ulla, is what is one ritual that you'd be proud if someone stole from you?
Oh, well, the ones I just mentioned, I think the LinkedIn welcome is so easy to do. It's very low threshold, and I hope as many people out there will steal that. So other than that, I can't really answer that question, except that I just hope that, you know, I have a few examples in my book as well that people are free to steal with grace.
Do you have someone or a company whose culture you look up to?
That's a difficult question. I haven't thought about that. I know that there's a company in Norway called Remarkable. They also have a remarkable culture. They've actually hired like half of my people now, I think.
Wow.
So they must have a good culture since they chose to join that company. They are still a scale up, I would say, but they're doing really well, and you should go check them out. They have developed a pad for note taking that feels like paper.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends who really love taking notes on a Remarkable tablet.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So one topic I want to touch on, which we talked about in the pre-show, is feminine versus masculine energy when leading, which hopefully will take us to your next venture as well. But how do you see that differently? We don't talk often about feminine versus masculine energy. Tell us more about your perspective.
I'd say that some of the best leaders I've had are men, and some of the worst are women. So I'm not going to say at any time that women are better leaders than men or vice versa. I think we need to talk about the masculine and the feminine sides that everybody has. And I personally, I started my career in IBM, a very male-dominated company, but with extremely good values, and I was well taken care of there as a young and ambitious person. I was 25 when I joined the company, and I just felt personally that I had to be super masculine and dress very masculinely and win all discussions and was to be really tough. And some of my leaders, there one leader, the first one I had there was a guy, and he said, "Look, you should just relax a little bit. You don't have to win all discussions. Just be yourself." And that taught me a little bit about. I didn't change until I turned 40. Actually, that's when I felt that okay, now I really know what I'm doing, and I got it under control, and now I can maybe appreciate my skills a little more. I have 15 years of experience from the IT industry, and I felt I really had to prove that within myself. And I think a lot of women feel that they have to prove themselves a lot more than the guys have to, and maybe it's true as well. There's a lot of studies that women have to be doing twice as good as men in order to get to where they want in a company. But this was definitely coming from me, nobody else. So I kind of learned to appreciate my feminine sides over time, and realized that this is really one of the strong assets that I have is my femininity, or my feminine way of leading, which means back to where we started, leading with the heart and with love. And a lot of guys don't dare to do that. I think they're afraid of being soft, but we need both. We need both the masculine side, which is the side that creates the results. The fact that we can actually get things done is our masculine side, and our feminine side is the caring and the side that cares about people and that lets us be ourselves and be human. So I think we need both, whether we are men or women.
I absolutely 110% agree. Another lens I would look at this through is connection versus performance. And people often focus 100% on performance, but not on connecting with people. We see traditionally people as assets, as resources, HR, which is a term I hate to use a very common word. It talks about human resources, and we're not resources. We are not used for someone else's purpose or function. So we talk about performance, and performance has to do with resources, with machines, whereas connection has to do with understanding, with empathy, with synergy, with collaboration, with more nature-bound concepts. And another twist I would add to that is in the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is where you and I met a few weeks ago. We use the term connection before content. And I would also extend it to connection before performance. So that in a meeting, we need to first connect as people. We need to learn a little bit about each other. We need to be a little bit vulnerable with each other, talk a little bit about our background, our stories, where we came from, and so on, because that is the basis on which we form a relationship, on which we form trust, and then we can really drive that performance and deliver the best that we can. So I think masculine and feminine connects very much with connection and performance. We need both. And I would even add that connection needs to come before performance.
I don't disagree. And that's where it all starts. And you know, Andres, we do business with people, not with companies.
Absolutely. So as we wrap, Ulla, as you know, one of my favorite questions is, if you were to whisper to the ear of a leader who's not intentional about their culture, who is building a culture by default without knowing, what would you tell them? What would you ask them to rethink about culture?
It could be that for 20 years, business people have been saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and really think what that means. Because a lot of books are written about strategy. A lot of business school classes are taught in how to build strategy and implement strategy, and so many consultancy hours are spent on strategy and implementing it as well. Not so much, just a fraction of that is spent on culture. And if you don't design your culture with intention, culture will design itself. And so instead of thinking of culture as some fluffy thing that lives in the walls, think of it as a system. And if you don't design your culture, that fluffy little thing called culture can eat your cute little strategy at any meal, I would say, any second of the day. It has to go hand in hand. Culture and strategy, it needs to go hand in hand. And it's become diminished in business, in too many businesses, I'd say.
So before you go, Ulla, are there any parting thoughts or any book or anything else you'd recommend we consider? And where can people find out more about you?
Some of my favorite authors are Adam Grant, Amy Edmondson, and Brené Brown. They came up with their books during the time that we built eggs. I was inspired by them a lot. So I could recommend those 3 people to read. Also, there is a book called Net Positive Culture. No, not Net Positive. Sorry. The book is called Net Positive by Paul Polman and some other guy. I don't remember his name. Which is actually talking about net positive businesses, where businesses need to give more to the planet than they take, and so forth. And I think that having a net positive culture is the basis for building a net positive business. That's something I can recommend. Other than that, where people can find me, connect with me on LinkedIn. And there's also my website, Mother Hen Ventures, which is my company, Mother Hen Ventures. Or my book can be bought on Amazon.
And tell us a little about Mother Hen Ventures. We didn't get to touch it in the podcast.
No, we didn't talk about Mother Hen Ventures. I think a lot of people think that I called my company Mother Hen because my previous company was called Eggs, but it's not the reason. The reason is that I think there's too many roosters in the corporate chicken coop.
And what's your venture about?
It's Mother Hen Ventures is my holding company where I am a business angel and an angel investor. I currently only invest in women's health startups. including my own new venture called Femtech Studios. And I'm also, giving talks, and I'm also a mentor and doing workshops on culture building. So that's what I'm doing from my Mother Hen company.
Super. All right. So, Ulla, thank you for sharing with us your passion for culture and for
Thank you for having me.
all the examples and stories for how culture works at Eggs. I think there were a lot of takeaways there. For everyone who's been watching us all this time, thank you for giving us your undivided attention. If you have been watching us on YouTube, you'll see also you have seen the book that Ulla showed us earlier. You also will have seen her background, which is, I think, from your son, is it?
Yes, that's right. And my oldest son has painted this.
And if you did like the show, as much as I did enjoy talking with Ulla here and hearing about Firesoul leadership, you can leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or wherever else you listen to your podcast. And if you are serious about your culture and you want to measure it so you can improve it, you can check out rethinkculture.co. And finally, like I love saying at the end of every podcast, is keep on leading and creating a better workplace environment and culture for you, but especially for those around you. Take care.